Hello, welcome to Oracle tutorial. So I hope you have got a chance to see the other tutorials on the tables and records. So today we are going to talk about a little bit more theoretical concepts of database, which does have some practical implementation scenarios. So for example, there's something called normalization. What that means is that if you remember in our first discussion about separating the employee data and department data into two tables. And we went on creating these two tables, as if you remember. So here we have, let me separate this part out. Okay, so here we have employee and department because there are two sets of information. But what if we repeat all the department columns, like department name, department descriptions here, along with right under the department ID? Now that would mean, as we probably remember, that would mean really, for example, duplicating all the department information with each row. For example, we have, let's say there are 1,000 employees in HR department, which is, let's say, department ID 1. For all of them, that information would repeat because they have the same information, department ID, department name. And that probably is not a good way to store or retrieve or even manipulate data, because if something changes, then you have to really update. Let's say if department changes, department name, you have to update all the 1000 records, as we discussed before, because these data replicates. But now the way we stored it is we just have department ID. So if there's department name changes, all we have to do is update only one row, which is this. So this is called normalization. What that means is that we are storing, we are not storing data which is not needed. So we are separating out the data based on their behavior, or more not behavior, but they are the way they have the object, the type of information they represent. For example, department really is a separate type of information than employee. So we create a different table for each of them and then link them through some sort of a key. In this particular case, department ID. So this separating of information in different tables and to minimize the duplication of data is called normalization. Now, more advanced concepts you may have heard. There is something called first degree normalization, second degree normalization, third degree, and that's something we can cover in our future tutorials. But for the time being, just try to understand the core concepts of normalization, and that's pretty much all is needed. That we try to reduce the duplication of data. Now, having said that, there are certain situations where we may need to duplicate the data. For example, let's say when we write queries to run, say, large reports, meaning which join with which gets big data set, or which involves reading or going through the thousands or millions of records. That in those sort of large query situation, if you join two tables or even more, then the downside is that query would be slow. So there is no doubt of the fact that if we select all the information from, let's say, EMP, as opposed to joining EMP and department, there would be maybe, however insignificant, but maybe little bit time difference, because definitely everybody understands if you join the more table and the more rows they have, the slower it gets. So in one way is to get everything from one table. So that's where those are some of the areas where the trade-off needs to happen, meaning how much we gain by putting more information in one table and taking advantage of the fact that we can get everything from one table instead of joining, because that would slow down the query, versus the headache of duplicating the data, which would cause the 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 manipulation of scenarios. So one thing is to keep in mind is there is there is let me do some whiteboard work. So there is something called OLTP, application environment, and there is something called OLAP. So what are these? They are online transaction processing, OLTP, and online analytical processing. So these sort of applications tend to be more, you can say, read write heavy. What that means is that you are updating lots of records constantly, or entering a lot of records, inserting, whereas this one is only most just read. So that means data doesn't really get updated that frequently, but it's 90% of it read. So typical usage of this sort of application, OLAP, is something like let's say reporting environment, where you are just running reports, and every day, at the end of the day, you are updating the database. Whereas this is your more day-to-day applications, where let's say if you have an accounting system where you are entering sales data throughout the day, so which is also a lot of inserts going on. Now why am I saying all that? The reason I'm saying is that in this particular case, your main objective is to do lots of queries, and your objective is to make those queries faster. And in this particular case, you want to make your write faster. Means when you are inserting, somebody is inserting in accounting or sales data, you want to help him to, so that he can quickly submit, save the record through a screen and move on to the next one. So and as opposed to this one, where it has to be just, the query has to be good. So in a write heavy application, it's better to do normalization, because you don't want to duplicate all the data in one particular table. In certain situation, if you do that, then it may involve updating a lot of rows or inserting a lot of duplicate data. But whereas here, since your objective is to only query up, making query faster, then you may try to do more of what is called duplication of data, or more denormalization. So let me write down the word normalization, which means normalization and which means removing doing less duplicates as possible, as much as possible. And the opposite to do this is denormalization. It's Z or S, depending on whatever is the standard. You can good, I think, aside the spelling. So those are the sort of concepts. So having said that, let's move on to our tables, whatever we are discussing. So here we have so I hope you have understood the concepts of normalization. So let's do some examples. So let's say if we add department name, that would involve certain duplication of data. And sometimes you do, for whatever reason, no more practical scenarios, or where we have some level of duplication in most of the situations. I mean, the perfect normalization is more of a very idealistic scenario, which usually doesn't happen. But you should always refrain from doing too much of duplication. So try to have more structured data where data is mostly separated out into different pieces. And only when in most frequent joins, so for example, if you are doing lots of joins in most of the times, you may have allow some duplicates to be there. So that's all pretty much for normalization. I hope you've understood the concept, and we'll discuss some more advanced concepts in our future videos. Thank you.